Well, hello everybody. Now, by now, you're accustomed to these webinars as part of this webinar series we're doing. We're introducing a bunch of the features that Draft Digital is kind of famous for, and some that you may not know existed, that's on me. I'm the guy who's supposed to make sure you know about this stuff. But what we've learned is that even though we talk about this stuff all the time, there are some people out there who just aren't aware of certain things and what they're able to do with the Drafted Digital platform. And that is why we've brought on Lexi, who is going to walk us through I think, one of the more important sort of behind the scenes tools for Drafted Digital. I don't know. Would you call it a tool? I guess it's a series of tools.
Yeah, I would say that it's more of like it's honestly just an important part of making a book in general. Because when we're working with authors, a lot of times this is something we will have to bring up because it's something very pivotal to getting their books live. And unfortunately, a lot of them just respond back with, what is metadata?
Yeah.
So I wanted to, join you here, give a little bit of insight on how our metadata tools work, what that metadata is, and how it's important to our authors publishing to our sellers.
Excellent. All right. And then that said, we're going to hop right on in to this discussion of metadata. And we're going to offer you some tips and stuff as well as walk through how to do this on Draft Digital. So get ready. This ought to be a fun one. And of course, if you're watching live, this is all pre-recorded, but feel free to ask your questions in the comments. We've got people floating around in there right now who are going to answer those for you. And if you're just watching this recorded later on or listening to it or whatever it is you're doing, I'm sorry you missed out on the live questions, but you could still reach out to us at support@drafteddigital.com with any questions you have, and even leave comments on these videos and audio so that we can come back around and maybe help you out later. So that said, I'm going to bring up Lexi's screen here. Let's see. There we go.
There it is. Yeah. So I decided to create a new book project so we could just go through step by step and really give everyone the chance to see what it is I'm doing and how that impacts things. So right away, you're going to see shared universe. This is a very specific feature just for authors that have opted into our shared universes. So for now, we can skip past that. That might be its own future series. Who knows? But for now, we go to the front cover, which we do classify as shared metadata because this is not necessarily just the cover that we're putting in your book project, though if we use our conversion, it will still input the cover image into the ebook that we create. But the cover also matters for ebook sellers so that they have a thumbnail to show off your book. I know that we always say, you can't judge a book by its cover, but as authors, we also know that people do. And covers do help sell books. So I did just create a very bland test cover for this particular book. But I wanted something to fill in here. So just things you're going to want to be aware of for your cover image. It's going to be a front cover image. You don't want to put in a wraparound because that's not what's going to make a good thumbnail. You're also going to want to make sure that your title is on this book cover. If you have a very nice image, that's great. But if you don't have a title on there, the reader is not getting a feel for what it is that they're signing up for. So beyond the cover image, you're going to want to go next to the book title. The title is the thing that people are going to find your book by. It is the thing that when people talk about your book, they're talking about your book title. So this is one of the most important pieces of metadata, and there are a couple rules to it. For one, when it comes to capitalization, I know it's very tempting for some authors to just put their titles in all capital letters because they're very excited about it, and that's great, but it doesn't always make a book look very professional for all of the title to just be in all capital letters. So our sellers actually want us to be using proper title capitalization, things like the first letter. So test should be in all capital letters, book because it's a noun. But then, so you want most of your words to be in capital letters. The only things that really shouldn't be in all capital first letters would be your articles, your prepositions, your sorry, I had a moment where I forgot how language words work.
That's okay.
Yeah. The only things in your title that should be in lowercase or should start in lowercase letters, should I say, are articles, coordinating conjunctions, and prepositions. So the word for in this case would be lowercase, but everything else, test should be in capital letters to start. Book should be in capital letters to start. And then for these subtitle, once again, we're going to follow the same rules. Subtitles. So if you have a subtitle, we recommend that you include that in your book title. It should just be after a colon to denote that as a subtitle. Not all of our sellers actually have like a subtitle field in their metadata. So this is the best way that we've found for our authors to enter in their capitalization. Once we get past there, it's worth mentioning language. Language is a metadata field, and for a lot of our authors, English is obviously the language we publish the most in, but it's not the only language we use. We have plenty of other languages. If your book is primarily in another language and that's the market you're looking to reach, you're definitely going to want to make sure not to gloss over this. It's a thing that a lot of foreign language books get rejected for. And it also allows you to determine which sellers actually distribute books in your language so that you're not sending a book that they're not going to be able to distribute. I figured it was worth at least casually bringing up language. When it comes to series information, we allow you to very easily group things in series. You're going to want to make sure once you create a series, which we're just going to say this is the D2D test series. It's super exciting, I know. But once you create other books in this, you're going to want to make sure to just grab it from the drop down. If you create just different series that are close in name but not the same, that's going to end up impacting how they show up on the site. So you want them to be able to group these books together. That way, when someone gets to book 1, they can find book 2 nice and easily, which is why also volume numbers matter. You can obviously put volumes 1, 2, 3. I also felt like it was worth mentioning that, say you have a prequel, we do enable book 0 to be a thing, and we actually even allow for half volumes. So if you have a prequel that you want to label as like book 0.5, or if you have a supplementary book that goes in between books 1 and 2, you can put book 1.5. So this is just an easier way to keep your series organized and make it easier for your readers to find these things. In terms of publisher, this is you. With Draft to Digital, you as the person holding the account are the publisher. You can certainly use your own name. You can use your author name, or you can come up with a publisher name as long as you're not trying to use, a copyrighted or trademarked name or Draft to Digital. Fun fact, you don't want to put us in this field. We're not the publishers of your book. We're helping you distribute your book, but ultimately you are the publisher and you should be reflected as such. So make sure to pick a publisher name that you're going to want to use. Now, author name. Also, if you are the author, then this is obviously whatever your pen name is going to be. If you're publishing for someone else, this is where you're going to put in your author's name. You can pick multiple authors. So I have a whole list here. Once you create an author name, it will be added to your dropdown so that you can easily use it again for future books. You're typically going to default to the first author name you set up on your account, which in my case was Lexi Green. So let's say this is between Lexi Green and Alex Browning, 2 names that do not exist and are fictional people. But for now, they both exist here. You can have multiple author names. It's worth noting that different sellers are going to display multiple author name books differently. Some of them might list all of the authors on the book. Some of them, once you get past 2, might just say the first author et al. So it is relevant to remember who you set up as the first author name, because they're typically going to be seen as like the primary author of the book. This doesn't really impact much beyond how it shows up at vendors. Now, search terms is metadata that most of our sellers actually don't use a lot. Most of them don't currently have their search engines or the search functions optimized to include search terms. But notably, Amazon does. So if you are publishing to Amazon through us, it's definitely worth thinking about what some of the notable search terms are for your book, things that people could find your would be looking for if they were looking for topics in your book. So, for instance, like let's say I am writing a college romance because that is a thing I've been writing, and maybe even I don't know new adults, um, and you could just list a couple. As far as we're aware, currently Amazon uses 7 search terms, but that's always subject to change because Amazon's whims are the whims of Amazon.
Yep.
So, regardless, this is just things that you think would be relevant if someone were to be asking for, well, what if I wanted a book about orange farming, hypothetically? So, this is notably not the same as your categories. That's actually what we're going to get into with BISACs.
Yeah.
Now, BISACs are the industry standard for categorizing books. So, these are not categories that we have set up. This is actually just the categories that the whole publishing industry defaults to. And there are some important ways to use it successfully. So, for one thing, you'll see a lot of subjects in this subject list. Most of these are nonfiction. A lot of people just kind of see this and think, okay, my book has topics of family and relationships. It's a book about families. If your book is fiction, this is not what you're looking for. These are categories that people are looking for if they're looking for an instructional or informative book about families. If you're working in fiction, typically all of your BISACs are going to be under this fiction umbrella. Other things that I think are notable to include, just because people constantly do publish these and they have their own special BISACs. If you're publishing screenplays, scripts, anything like that, you're going to want to be using your drama categories. And if you're publishing comic books or you're publishing digital graphic novels, then we actually do have categories specifically for comics and graphic novels. And also, there is a category for non-classifiable. Don't use that. I know that for some people, they like to think my book is so unique, and I get that. And your book is unique. It is also incredibly classifiable. So I recommend finding a category for you. It might be absurdist, it might be satire, but there will be a category somewhere in this list that will suit your book. Because you need to remember, this is how people are going to find your book. This is the way it's going to be categorized and placed on these sites. So if you want to find your correct audience, these categories matter. Now, when it comes to fiction, there are actually different breakdowns based on your target audience demographic. Juvenile fiction is for children. So these are books that are going to be typically marketed to people 12 and under. In fact, when you pick one of these, it even lets you pick an age range for what group of children your book would be appropriate for. You can also pick young adult fiction, which, as we all know, is an incredibly common and incredibly popular genre. And there's tons of subcategories in here as well. And then if you're looking for adult fiction, that's when you're going to use the fiction category. You want to make sure that you're only using one of these. Your book does have a specific demographic, even if it's something that could potentially be enjoyed by all ages. You're going to want to decide whether or not your target audience is teenagers, children, or adults. And then once you pick your main category, as I said, you have a ton of subcategories here. So let's say my book is romance. Obviously, there's 8 billion kinds of romance. So
Yeah.
you click on the romance subcategory, you get a new drop down of options under that, subcategories of romance. So we're going to say that mine is contemporary. We're going to say that it is LGBT bisexual. We're going to say that it is fantasy. Let's spice it up. Actually, let's not spice it up because contemporary and fantasy would be a hard sell. Let's say it's sports. There we go. Contemporary LGBT sports. Easy
Okay.
collection. you'll see that when you pick them, they're listed here as prioritized BISACs. So these are the ways your book is prioritized, and the order here also matters. We allow you to drag and drop these because not all of our sellers use 5 BISACs. It's very great to be able to give that much definition to your book. But for instance, Apple only uses the first BISAC. So it is pretty important that whatever you think the most appropriate BISAC is for your book, you're putting it at the top because that's how people are going to find you. And that's how all of the sellers are going to classify your book. So that's pretty much what we've got for the shared metadata page. This we collect all of this particular metadata here because this will apply to ebooks, and then once D2D print goes out to users, this is also information that will be important for print users because all of these things apply to both of those. But once you have everything set up here, all of your mandatory fields are filled, then you will start your book, and that will actually take you to what is officially step 1. Here you'll see that my book title is showing right here. And if you need to see or change your metadata, because a lot of people struggle to see on this page how to get back to what they just set up. We have an orange link here. It says edit shared metadata and cover. When you click it, it's going to show you a summary of all the metadata that we just selected on the other page. And if you need to go back, you can just hit edit shared metadata. It's going to take you back to that step so you can make changes accordingly. In terms of this page, we have the option to upload manuscript. The manuscript is actually one of the few things that we would not classify as metadata. So I suppose an easy way to define metadata, which I probably should have said at the beginning, is essentially all of the content that is related to your book that is not found in your book. It is the data that is sent to the sellers so that they can help build the listing for your book. So we'll pick a manuscript, the one that I have on hand. We allow you to set a release date, which obviously is pretty important. If your book is something that either you're releasing for the first time or you released previously, you can set a past release date if the book has been, say, released on October 21st, October 1st, 2021. Sorry, we got into a new year and already my head has just spun out. Functionally, these will behave the same. We're still going to launch it. It will be considered a new listing. This will just allow you to set it up to let people know that this has previously been published. Like this is the original publishing date. You can also just set it up for the current date, and there's no problems with that either. So the current date, I believe, is the 7th. I could be correct. Today is the 14th, isn't
it? In our time? No, it is not.
Oh, cool. I actually. Oh, I wish. Oh, wait. This is because I'm in December. Thank you for the catch. Oh, hey, you know what's super helpful?
What's that?
We have the current date set in red. So in case you get lost, that's also pretty important.
That is useful, yeah.
But
it's easy to get lost, just like you're saying. Like if you started, for example, you started this whole process earlier and then came back in, dates like that it may be set for the earlier date as your release date. So it's important to know that you can change all that from this spot.
Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, if your book has already been published, you can still move the release date back further in the past if you want to recredit it as the original release date. The only thing you can't do if your book is already published is move the date to the future. And that's because of what I'm about to talk about, which is pre-orders. A lot of people ask how to set up pre-orders on our site, and it actually has to do specifically with the release date metadata, because literally what you're doing is setting a future release date. So let's say the 31st. And now if I proceed from this point forward, this book project, if I published it today, would be sent to sellers to be listed as a pre-order for the sellers that we do pre-orders through. So that is Apple, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and then most of our library vendors do pre-orders. So if you set it for a future release, those will list it as pre-orders, and then the other vendors will wait to list it until the day of. If you set this future release date, you can also proceed forward in the book project without giving us a manuscript, you can submit it as an assetless pre-order. We just recommend giving us the file for this book, the completed file, 10 days prior to the release or more. The vendors recommend 10 days because it allows us time to review the file. It allows us time to make sure everything is going to be ready for release, and it allows them time to prepare your listing to go live. So obviously, just more foresight, more time ahead is only going to make things smoother on your release date, and that's what we're looking for. So the last, I'd say the last piece of metadata that we're looking at here is the description of your ebook.
Yeah.
So this is, I've said before that, people judge books on their cover, and that's part of what sells a book, and that is partially true. This is the other thing that's going to sell people on your book. If someone's never heard of your book before, but they stumble on it, the first thing they're going to do after looking at your very pretty cover is they're going to check the description to see what they're getting into. So you want to make sure that this sells the idea of your book. It introduces potentially the concept of who your characters are, if those are what people are supposed to care about. It's going to give them a general introduction into your world or your plot or whatever it is that is meant to hook the reader to be interested in reading more. So if you're just going to, we don't recommend just writing things like the first poetry book from me, because that's great. It's technically informative of what the book is, but it doesn't give any sign of what's inside the book. Yeah. So likely it's just going to cause people to pass over it, and that's not what sellers are looking for when they're listing your book on their platform. They want it to sell in the same way that you want it to sell. Yeah. So people are just looking for this, the information that is relevant to your book. They're not looking for you to show a chapter list. So this is not where you're going to put in like a facsimile of your table of contents. They're not looking for just a big bulk of keywords, like just like a list of keyword and then 12 different kinds of words. They want to just have that description tell them what they're going to get in your book and take it from there. The sellers also have a couple of things that they're looking for. Things like not including like competitor references directly in this, or not including URLs directly in this. The sellers don't want the description to take people away from their platform. So if you're telling people to find your book on Amazon, or if you're linking to your own website or some other website online, sellers might reject the content because they're not looking for the description to take people away from their environment. For Amazon in particular, you're also going to want to be aware that Amazon actually will not accept your book if you have reviews in the description. You can put those reviews in the book itself, but if you put it in the description, that is another thing that they are going to reject for. And finally, in terms of just making sure your description looks professional, I can understand the temptation to write in all bold or, once again, all capital letters. You're probably excited, but that can be distracting at best, and it can look unprofessional at worst. So you're going to want to make sure to tastefully use your bold functions. We give you the tools here. We give you bold, we give you italics, we even give you underlines and bullets. We're trying to give you all the tools necessary. Use them wisely, create a tasteful description that will tell people what your book's about, and the sellers can take it from there. But yeah, beyond that, we do allow here just paid contributors in case you have other authors that you're working with and you need to set up like payment splits with them. This is your where you would set that up. If you have non-author contributors, like an editor or a publisher or a marketer that you want to credit, you can certainly put that here. That will just be sent to the sellers as metadata. And then finally, you can select you can give us your ISBN, or you can sign up for one of our ISBNs, and that's all you're going to need from there. Congratulations, you've made it out of everything that has to do with metadata for your book. And nice. Hopefully with this information, you can make sure that your metadata is going to give your book the best chance to sell and the best chance to succeed on the platforms that you're going to publish it to.
Excellent. Well, that was a great overview of metadata, at least from the Draft Digital side. I mean, your experience on other platforms could vary, but I think why would you want to do that? I mean, just come here. Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, even with even like obviously this is a rundown of how to set up your metadata here, but a lot of the same rules apply if you're going to be going elsewhere. These are
Yeah.
things that you do want to keep in mind. These are rules that the sellers are going to have regardless of where you're going through.
Hmm.
So hopefully with this information, whether you go through us or ideally through us, or you publish somewhere else, or even go through some kind of hybrid model, hopefully this gives you a better idea of, at the very least, what metadata is. So hopefully
Now,
we can stop asking that
if
question.
if an author were to write in to
Yeah.
say support@draftedigital.com, and you, Lexi, were the one who got the email, and they
Mhm.
asked, "What are some tips? I mean, what do I need to know about metadata that might help me do it better?" Do you have any tips?
I would say that your metadata is the picture of what your book is supposed to be to readers. Uh, a reader in most situations isn't going to see what's inside your book.
Yeah,
And a lot of authors, the inside of your book is what you've spent the most time on. It's your baby. It's the thing you literally wrote.
yeah,
And you want people to read that, but it's also not the thing that's necessarily going to sell people on your book. So when it comes to your metadata, you're going to want to do research into the topic or genre you're working in, and you're going to want to see what works. There are, like, when it comes to your author name, if you're working very specifically in a certain genre, then there are sometimes author name conventions that work better in that genre. There's a reason why you see fantasy authors so often do things like uh, abbreviate their names: J.K.
yeah,
Rowling, J.R.R. Martin, G.R.R. Martin, yeah, J.K. J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, these authors do that for a reason. It's because historically it has made sense in that genre. So a lot of it comes down to your research. When it comes to BISACs, typically, as much as it's fun to write in multiple genres, it does benefit you to have a niche. So
yeah,
picking your BISACs, understanding what market you're catering to, and that's really what metadata is for: is finding your market and marketing to it. So when you pick your BISACs, you're going to want some consistency. You're going to want to operate in the same genre, unless, once again, if you have completely different series in completely different genres, treat them accordingly. They're not going
yeah,
to. You're not going to treat them the same.
yeah.
Um, Also, if you can work within a series, historically, series tend to sell better than one-off books. People like being led into another world and like being able to have a roadmap of content that they're going to be able to look forward to.
Exactly. All right. Yeah, I would recommend also, as part of your research, is there's several ways you can look into things that would help shape your metadata. One of those is keyword tools, like Publisher Rocket is a good one to do some research and find what keywords might be best on platforms like Amazon, but also elsewhere. You could use those same keywords in like advertising and stuff, but
Yeah.
uh, that
And
sort of thing is helpful.
Yeah, and there's also plenty of resources online and even services that people offer that allow you to really focus in and make a like a better description. For instance, I know we've had
Yep.
people on the podcast before who work with people and sell the service to really punch up their description and make it something that's going to get eyes on it. So,
Yes.
the more you invest in your metadata, as much as it just seems like an afterthought, that can honestly be the thing that pushes you over to success, that pushes you
Yeah.
into the public eye. So,
Yeah. Far from being an afterthought, the metadata is actually the first thing anyone encounters about you as an author.
yeah,
The first writing they encounter, that's going to set the tone for the whole experience. So,
yeah,
okay. Well, I think that's a pretty good overview of metadata from the through the draft to digital lens for in particular. And I think if you want to know any more, a good source, of course, is always the D2D blog. In fact, I think I have a handy dandy URL here somewhere. If you go to
that's
draftedigital.com/blog, you can find out more. But that's going to wrap us up for this episode of the D2D webinar series we're running. So these have been good, and I think people are getting a lot out of them. So thank you, Lexi, for being our guide, our Sherpa, if you will, through the peaks of metadata.
you know what? It's been my pleasure, and Kevin, thank you for bringing me on to do this.
You got it. Now, everybody else, you can continue to linger in the comments for a little while and ask some questions. We are there, and we're going to help you out. But make sure you are checking out the rest of this webinar series on YouTube and elsewhere. To do that, you might want to go check out d2dlive.com and bookmark that site because that's where we're going to count down to these things every week, every month. We have all kinds of live streams that are very informative. We have guests. We have webinars like this one. So definitely tune into those. You can generally, we have these Ask Us Anythings where you can literally ask us, well, anything about D2D, about the publishing world. And we're generally there to help you. Make sure you subscribe to us. I know this is a lot. This is tiny little text now because I've added stuff, but make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook and now on TikTok. If you go to youtube.com or facebook.com/drift2digital, you'll basically find us very easily. You can like, you can subscribe, you can follow, you can click little bells, all those things. If you go to d2d.tips/TikTok, you'll be able to catch up on what's coming up live, kind of get some previews. And then it'll also let you see what we're doing in that space, which is Lexi is mostly responsible for. So blame her. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for being a part of this D2D webinar, and we will see you all next time.
Bye.
Take care.